People always said I was too quiet for my own good, too patient, too willing to let things slide. My late husband used to say that about me. He'd laugh when he said it. Not meanly, just the way a man laughs when he's been married long enough to know a woman's nature. "Eleanor," he'd say, "you could watch the house burn down and wait to see if it puts itself out." He wasn't wrong. I am Eleanor. I'm 67 years old. I live alone now in the same house in Dayton, Ohio, where I raised my son, where I planted the rose bushes along the front walk that still come back every May without being asked. I worked 31 years as an office manager for a civil engineering firm downtown. I balanced budgets, mediated disputes, scheduled around egos, and smiled through every bit of it. I am not a dramatic woman. I do not make scenes. I do not say the sharp thing, even when the sharp thing is right there, sitting on the tip of my tongue like a splinter. I want to be clear about that before I tell you what happened at my granddaughter's wedding. My son's name is Craig. He's 43. He's tall like his father and stubborn like nobody I've ever been able to explain. He married a woman named Sasha when he was 28, and I will say this about Sasha. She is organized, she is capable, and she has always made it very clear, in the politest possible way, that she finds me slightly embarrassing. Not my values, not anything I've done that I can name, just me. The way I dress, which is practical. The way I talk, which is plain. The neighborhood I live in, which is the same one they moved away from the moment they could afford to. Their daughter is Jessica Ann. She turned 23 in February, and this past June, she married a young man named Owen at a vineyard outside Columbus. It was a beautiful venue. I know because I looked it up online after they sent the save the date card. I was not initially going to be allowed to attend. That sentence still takes me a moment to write. I found out the way you find out things you're not supposed to know. By accident, on a Sunday afternoon when my son called to ask about Granddad's pocket watch. He wanted to know if I still had it because Owen's family had a tradition of the groom's family presenting something meaningful at the rehearsal dinner, and Craig thought it might be a nice gesture. A nice gesture. The pocket watch his father carried for 40 years. I said I'd look for it. And then before we hung up, he said, almost like an afterthought, "Mom, I want to talk to you about the wedding." I thought he was calling to discuss logistics, seating arrangements maybe. Whether I needed a ride, he said. "Sasha and I have talked it over, and we think it might be better if you weren't there." I didn't say anything. I've learned that silence does more than any word you could reach for in a moment like that. He kept going. He said the venue had limited seating, which I knew was not true because the save the date had said 200 guests. He said it was going to be a very specific aesthetic, his word, aesthetic, and that Sasha had worked hard on the vision and they just wanted everything to go smoothly. And then he said the thing that I've turned over in my mind every single day since. He said, "You know how you can be sometimes, Mom. We just don't want anything to feel uncomfortable." I said, "I see." He said, "You're not upset, are you?" I said, "I'll look for the watch." I found it that afternoon. It was in the cedar box in my closet where it had lived for 11 years, next to my husband's discharge papers and the folded flag from his funeral. I held it for a long time. Then I put it back. I did not send it. Now, here is the part where a different woman might have called her son back and said something she'd regret, or called her daughter-in-law, or called somebody. I did not do any of those things. I went to my kitchen, I made a pot of coffee, and I sat at the table by the window where the bird feeder is, and I thought about the last 23 years. When Craig was 22 and living in a studio apartment with 3 roommates, I co-signed his first car loan. When he and Sasha got engaged, I gave them $20,000 toward the down payment on their house in Upper Arlington. I didn't loan it. I gave it. I told them it was a gift from their father and me, which was the truth. We had set it aside years before he passed. When Jess was born, I drove up to Columbus every other weekend for the first 2 years to help. I did laundry, I made dinners, and left them in labeled containers in the freezer. I babysat so Craig and Sasha could have weekends away, which they needed, because their marriage was not always easy, and I understood that. When Jess started at Ohio State, Craig's business had hit a rough patch. A construction consulting firm he'd started with a partner, and the partner had made some decisions that cost them badly. Craig came to me. I gave him $35,000 to cover payroll for 4 months while they restructured. He paid back 12 of it over the next 2 years and then stopped mentioning it. I didn't bring it up. I am not telling you these things to make myself a martyr. I'm telling you because I want you to understand the word uncomfortable. I want you to understand what kind of discomfort I was apparently capable of causing that needed to be protected against at a 200-person vineyard wedding. I went through the next 2 months the way I go through most things. Quietly. I kept my routine. I went to my water aerobics class on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. I had dinner with my friend Roberta on the first Friday of every month. I tended my roses. I did not call Craig, and Craig did not call me, except once in April when he called to ask if I'd found the watch. And I said I hadn't been able to locate it, which was the closest I have come to lying in a very long time. The wedding was June 14th. On June 14th, I woke up at 6:30, like I always do. I made my coffee. I sat by the window. I thought about Jess when she was 4 years old, sitting on my kitchen counter in her pajamas, eating cereal and telling me very seriously about a dream she'd had about a purple horse. I thought about teaching her to play gin rummy when she was 9. I thought about the afternoon she called me, not her mother, when she'd had her heart broken by a boy junior year of high school. She'd called me because, she said, she knew I wouldn't make it a big thing. I would just listen. I sat by the window and I listened to the morning. That afternoon, I got in my car and I drove, not to Columbus. I want to be clear about that. I did not drive to the vineyard. I did not make a scene or show up uninvited or do anything that would give Craig the satisfaction of having been right about me. I drove to the cemetery where my husband is buried, about 20 minutes from the house. I sat with him for a while. I told him about the wedding. I told him I hadn't sent the watch. He would have found that funny, I think. He would have said something that made me laugh even though it probably shouldn't have. I drove home. I made a simple dinner. I watched the news. I went to bed at 10. 3 days later, my granddaughter called me. Jess. My Jess, who had known, apparently. She had known for months that I wasn't going to be there, because her parents had told her it was a mutual decision, that Grandma had decided the travel would be too much, that I'd sent my love and my blessings. She had believed them, because why would she question it? I live 45 minutes away. I have driven to Columbus through January ice storms, but she believed them because she had no reason not to. She found out the truth because Craig let something slip the week after the wedding, some comment about how things had gone smoothly. The implication clear enough that his wife caught it, and then, being 23 and honest in the way young women are when they're still new enough to the world to be shocked by dishonesty, Jess pushed until she got the full story. She called me crying. I let her cry. I didn't say anything against her father. I didn't have to. She was saying enough on her own. How could they? Why would they? She would have wanted me there. She had wondered why I hadn't at least sent a card, and now she knew I hadn't even known to send one. I said, "I'm so sorry, sweetheart." She said, "Why are you apologizing? You didn't do anything." "I know," I said. "I'm sorry it happened." There was a long pause, and she said, "Grandma, what are you going to do?" I told her I didn't know yet. That was honest. I truly didn't know, in the sense that I hadn't made any decisions, hadn't put anything in motion. But I think somewhere in the back of my mind, behind the part of me that was still sitting quietly watching to see if the house would put itself out, something had already decided. The following week, I made an appointment with my attorney. His name is Mr. Abernethy. He's been my attorney since my husband's estate was settled, and he is a plain-spoken man, which I appreciate. I told him what had happened. I told him about the wedding, about the money over the years, about the watch. I told him I wanted to revise my will. He asked me what I had in mind. My estate is not enormous, but it is not nothing. The house, which is paid off and worth somewhere around $280,000 in today's market. My retirement accounts, a small investment portfolio my husband had started in the 90s that I'd left alone and let grow, some jewelry, some furniture, the cedar box. I told Mr. Abernethy that I wanted to remove Craig and Sasha as primary beneficiaries. I wanted to establish a trust for Jess, a direct trust, going to her and to her alone, to be released in portions at 25, 30, and 35, so that no one could get their hands on it before she was ready to manage it herself. I wanted to make a meaningful donation to the Dayton Children's Hospital Foundation in my husband's name, and I wanted the cedar box, the pocket watch, the discharge papers, the flag, to go to the Veterans Heritage Museum downtown, where someone might actually know what they were looking at. Mr. Abernethy didn't say much while I talked. When I finished, he said, "Is this what you want?" I said yes. He said, "Do you want time to think about it more?" I said I'd had 4 months. We signed the paperwork 2 weeks later. I did not tell Craig. I did not tell Sasha. I did not call anyone and announce what I'd done the way people sometimes do when they want credit for a decision. I just did it. And then went home and cooked dinner and felt, for the first time in a long time, like I could breathe all the way down to the bottom of my lungs. Craig called me in August. He called on a Sunday, which is when he usually calls when he calls, which is not often. He asked how I was doing. He asked about the roses. He mentioned that Jess and Owen were looking at buying their first house, and that it was a competitive market. The Columbus suburbs had been brutal this year. He said this casually, conversationally, the way you mention something when you're hoping the other person will offer something in return. I said, "Real estate is tough everywhere right now." He said, "Yeah." A pause. "Jess told me she called you?" "She did," I said. Another pause. Longer. "Mom, I think we should probably talk." I said, "All right." "I know you're probably upset about the wedding," he said. "Sasha and I made a decision that we thought was best at the time. I'm not going to stand here and say it was the right call, but you know how things get. Planning a wedding is stressful, and Sasha had a very clear vision, and we just didn't think." "Craig," I said. He stopped. I said, "You told your daughter I had decided not to come because the travel was too much." Silence. I said, "I live 45 minutes away." He said, "I know. That was wrong. That was wrong of us, and I'm sorry." It was a real apology, I think, as real as Craig knows how to make them. And I have been his mother long enough to know the difference between a real one and one designed to get something. This one was real. It just came about 8 months too late, and approximately $55,000 too late, and it did not unmake the 14th of June. I said, "Thank you for saying that, Craig." He said, "Are we okay?" I said, "We're talking, that's something." He took that as a yes. I let him. He talked for a few more minutes about Jess and Owen and the house situation, and then we said goodbye, and I sat for a long time afterward, looking at nothing in particular. We're talking. That's something. That is true. But okay covers a lot of ground, and I am 67 years old, and I have learned the difference between the ground that's solid and the ground that shifts when you put weight on it. I know which kind Craig has always been. I love him. He is my son. I will love him until I am not here to love anyone. But love and trust are not the same thing, and I stopped confusing them somewhere around the second time Jess asked me why Grandma wasn't at school events, and I realized nobody had told her I'd been invited. Jess came to see me in September, alone. She drove up from Columbus on a Saturday with a pan of the lemon bars she knows I like, and a look on her face like someone who had been doing a lot of thinking. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had had my coffee on June 14th, and she put the lemon bars between us and folded her hands and said, "Grandma, I owe you an apology." I told her she owed me nothing. She said, "I believe them. I should have called you. I should have thought." I reached across and put my hand over hers. I said, "You were a bride. You were 23 years old. You had enough to carry." She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, "I want you to know something. Owen and I, if we ever have kids, and I hope we do, I want you to be there. For everything. Not just the big things." I said, "I'll be there." We ate the lemon bars. She stayed until evening. When she left, I stood in the doorway and watched her taillights until they turned off at the end of the street, and then I went back inside. I have not told Craig about the will. I don't plan to tell him. That is not the point of it. The point of it was never to punish him or to have something to hold over him. The point was to make a decision that was mine to make, to stop letting the most important choices about my life be made for me by people who find me slightly embarrassing at vineyard weddings. The money will go where it does the most good. The watch will go somewhere, it will be understood. And my granddaughter will have something solid beneath her feet, something that doesn't shift when she needs it. My husband used to say I was too patient. Maybe. But I have also been patient long enough to know that some things, if you wait them out, clarify themselves. Craig is my son, and I will take his Sunday phone calls, and I will ask about his business, and I will send his birthday card every year on time. But I see him now the way you see a road you've driven so many times. You know every pothole by heart. You don't hate the road. You just don't expect it to be any different than it is. Just texted me last week. She sent a picture, her and Owen in front of a house. Small, cream-colored, a front porch with a wooden railing, a yard that will need work. She wrote, "We got it. Come see it soon?" I wrote back, "On my way." I wasn't, not that day. But I meant it the way I meant most things. Steadily. Without drama. Without requiring anyone to believe it before it was true. The roses came back again this May without being asked. Some things do. I've thought a lot about what it means to finally stop waiting. I spent 67 years being the kind of woman who absorbs things, who lets the hard word pass without answering it, who fills in the silence with patience because that's what you do. That's what I was taught women do, what mothers do, what the person who loves the most in any room quietly does while everyone else takes up space. And for a long time I told myself that was strength. I'm not sure anymore that it was. I think sometimes it was just habit. The same way you take the same route to the grocery store for 20 years, not because it's the best route, but because you stopped thinking about it. What Craig did hurt me. I won't dress that up. A man who will look his own mother in the eye, or in my case, over the telephone, and say, "You know how you can be sometimes," has made a choice about who she is to him. He has filed her somewhere small and inconvenient and decided that's where she lives. And the cruelest part isn't even the decision itself. It's that he then told his daughter I had chosen not to come. As though I were the one who needed managing. That's the thing about dismissing someone quietly. You have to keep doing it. You have to build a whole architecture of small lies just to hold the first one up. What I know now, that I maybe didn't know clearly enough before, is that the way people treat you is information. It's not a mystery to be solved, or a misunderstanding to be smoothed over, or a bad day to be excused. It is information. Craig gave me information on that phone call, and I was 67 years old, and I finally decided to use it. I didn't change my will out of anger. I want to be honest about that because it matters. Anger fades, and decisions made from it tend to warp in the cooling. I made that appointment with Mr. Abernethy from something quieter and more certain, the understanding that I had spent decades putting my resources where my love was, and my love hadn't been wrong, but my judgment about who was a good steward of it had been. Jess is a good steward. She always has been. She's the one who called me, who drove up with lemon bars, who said, "I want you there for everything," without anyone telling her she was supposed to. Jess did that because of who she is, not because of anything I engineered. And that's the part that stays with me. Character isn't inherited and it isn't purchased. It grows in a person the way my roses come back every May, because something in the root is sound. You can't manufacture that in someone who doesn't have it, and you can't take it away from someone who does. I am still Craig's mother. I will always be. I answer when he calls. But I stopped, somewhere in all of this, confusing love with obligation, and I stopped letting someone else's low opinion of me become my own. That might be the quietest, most important thing I've ever done.